Our next speaker has been crisscrossing the country and getting a lot of people's attention. Her speech at the Iowa Freedom Summit in January was extraordinary. Carly Fiorina is someone who has had conservative principles ingrained in her from the time she was a little girl. Her father was a federal judge who taught his daughter about the Constitution and its role as our country's defense mechanism against the forces of government tyranny. He also taught her that the principles enshrined in the Constitution were worth fighting for with honor and integrity. She would take those principles and apply them to the free marketplace, becoming the first woman in history to lead a Fortune 50 company and one of the 10 most powerful women in the world, according to Forbes magazine. Carly has had one of the most successful business careers of any woman in American history, proving to the world that conservative leadership and principles were the key to success in business as well as in government. She is a champion of American competitiveness, arguing that if America is to be the world's leading economy in the 21st century, we must build an economy that innovates and outcompetes the rest of the world. In addition to being a business leader, she's also a political activist, supporting conservative causes for many, many years. In 2010, Carly Fiorina showed true character by challenging ultra-liberal Barbara Boxer in California's Senate election. She brought conservative principles to one of America's most liberal states, standing proudly for conservative ideals such as limited government, lower taxes, and a little thing called freedom. Nothing Barbara Boxer knows much about, by the way. She stood tall for the lives of the unborn and traditional marriage. And I can tell you, in California, that's called a profile in courage. So at a time when American politics is sorely lacking in leaders with real world experience, leaders who know what it takes to be successful in the private sector, our next speaker is a much needed breath of fresh air. Let me be clear, Hillary Clinton is not the only woman on the national stage right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carly Fiorina.
We were Jesus, save me, blue jean baby, born in the USA. Trailer park truck stop, faded little map dots, New York to LA. We were teenage dreaming, front seat leaning, baby, come give me a kiss.
Thank you so much and good afternoon. Thank you for hanging in here all day. I am so impressed with your stamina, and thank you very much for that very warm welcome. You know, like Hillary Clinton, I too am running for the President of the United States. But unlike Hillary Clinton, I am not afraid to answer questions about my track record or my accomplishments or my principles. I'm not sure you're aware of this, but Hillary Clinton has taken exactly 7 on-the-record questions since April 12th. I have actually answered over 200 on-the-record questions since Monday of this week. Okay, I have to admit that one of those questions was, did I consider a hot dog a sandwich? So, we'll subtract that one. What do you all think? Is a hot dog a sandwich? Yeah, no, so, okay. The New York Times now has a new regular feature. It's called Questions We Would Have Asked Hillary Clinton If We Had Only Had the Opportunity. I bet you have some questions too. I certainly do. Like, for example, why, in your first public statements after the terrorist attack that killed 4 brave Americans in Benghazi, why did you talk to us about the need for religious tolerance? Why do you lecture us on the need to empathize with our enemies while Christians are being beheaded and crucified in the Middle East? Did you really see no conflicts of interest while your family foundation took millions of dollars in donations and your husband took very large speakers' fees from foreign governments who had business before you while you served as Secretary of State? And then tell us again why we should be reassured that you had 2 Secret Service agents guarding that server in the basement at Chappaqua. Mrs. Clinton, we're not worried about the server being stolen. We're worried about the server being hacked. Perhaps it would be useful to have a president in the White House who actually understands something about technology. Recently, while I was reading my daily scripture, I came across Matthew 12:34. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And so today I want to speak to you about what fills my heart. When I was a little girl, one morning in Sunday school, my mother said to me, "What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God." I started my career as a secretary in a little 9-person real estate firm. And ultimately, I would become the chief executive officer of the largest technology company in the world and run for president of the United States. That's only possible in the United States of America. That's only possible here, and it is possible here and only here because our founders knew what my mother taught me. Our founders knew that everyone has God-given gifts. Our founders built a nation on the visionary and at the time radical idea that every life has potential and that everyone has the right to fulfill their potential. That is what our founders meant when they talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they believed that right to fulfill our potential came from God and should not be taken away by man or government. I have seen people in all kinds of circumstances. I have seen people in desperate and destitute circumstances, and yet it is true that every person has God-given gifts. Every person's life is filled with God-given potential. And whatever their circumstances, everyone truly does have the capacity to live a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. And we know that dignity comes from work, and purpose comes from family, and meaning comes from faith in our lives. I have been very blessed in my life, but like all of you, I also have been through hard times. I managed led Hewlett-Packard through the dot-com bust, the worst technology recession in 25 years, and yet over 6 years we transformed that company from one falling behind to one charging ahead, even as so many of the companies against which we competed disappeared off the stage altogether. At the end of that time, I was fired in a boardroom brawl. One of the things I know is that leaders challenge the status quo, and there are people who fight to preserve the status quo, and those who fight to preserve the status quo become the enemies of leaders who fight to change the system. When I battled cancer 6 years ago, I relied on the strength of my family and the power of my faith. And when a short time at the tail end of that battle, a short time later, we lost our younger daughter, Lori Ann, to the demons of addiction, my husband Frank and I relied on our personal relationship with Jesus Christ to save us from a desperate sadness. I met Frank, who is here today. I met Frank 34 years ago. And when we married 30 years ago, next Sunday, as a matter of fact, is our 30th anniversary. Thank you so much. When we married 30 years ago, I learned that his mother had been told to abort him. But she was a woman of great faith and great courage. and she chose to bring her child into the world. She spent a year in the hospital following his birth, and yet Frank was the joy of her life, and he has been the rock of mine. And I think often about how different my life would be had she made a different choice. As you know, I ran for the Senate against Barbara Boxer in California in 2010, and I ran as a proud pro-life conservative, and you don't do that unless you really mean it. For those of us who believe in the sanctity of life, we know that science is proving us right every day. We now know that the DNA in a zygote is precisely the same DNA as the day you die. Life is a continuum, a gift from God passed through the union of a man and a woman, and every life is filled with potential. I don't know about you, but I am really tired of being called extreme on this issue. The platform of the Democrat Party is a life is not a life until it leaves the hospital. That, ladies and gentlemen, is extreme. I must tell you, as I have traveled across this country over the last several years, I sense a deep disquiet. It is not political. It is not partisan. But people are disquieted because they fear we are losing something, and they think we are missing something. They fear we are losing that sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation. We always knew if something was worth doing, this nation would do it. Even better if it was hard to do. We would figure out how to do it. We knew that our own lives were filled with the possibilities that came with our God-given gifts, and we trusted that our children and our grandchildren's lives would be filled with even greater possibilities. And yet people no longer feel this sense of possibility, and when we lose a sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation, then we lose the core of who we are. And there is a reason why people feel as though we're losing possibilities. I see too many lives tangled up in webs of dependence. I see too many family-owned businesses or farms, small businesses, new businesses that are getting crushed. For the first time in U.S. history, we are now destroying more businesses than we are creating. The government has become so big, so powerful, so costly, so corrupt, so crushing in its weight and its ineptitude that only the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected can survive. And if you doubt that, think for a moment about the result of Dodd-Frank, a piece of legislation that was passed to protect us. But the consequence of Dodd-Frank is that 10 Wall Street banks too big to fail have become 5 Wall Street banks too big to fail, and meanwhile 3,000 community banks have gone out of business. In industry after industry after industry, the crushing weight of government complexity and power ensures that only the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected can deal with it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is called crony capitalism, and the answer to crony capitalism is not more government, it is less government. We truly have reached a point in this country where the potential of the people of America is being crushed by the weight of the government of America. And that is why this is a pivotal point in our nation's history, and that is why I am running for the presidency of the United States. People think that we are losing that sense of limitless possibility, and they are right, and what they think we are missing now is leadership. And so it is worth talking a moment about what leadership is. It is different than management. Managers are people who do the best they can within the existing system. Managers don't challenge the status quo. Managers tinker around the edges of a problem within the status quo. A leader's job is to challenge the status quo. A leader's job is to refuse to accept what has been broken simply because it has been that way for a very long time. When I was a secretary all those many years ago, I thought a leader was somebody with a big office. If you had the big office, if you had a big parking space, if you had perks, if you had a title, you must be a leader. And then I got a little older and wiser, and I learned that there were people with big offices and big titles who had not led a day in their lives. We have one of those in the Oval Office right now, ladies and gentlemen. Leadership, you see, is not about position. It's not about power. It's not about title. It's not about perks. Leadership is about changing the order of things for the better. And the highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. And that is the kind of leadership we now need in Washington, D.C. It is important to remember that ours was intended to be a citizen government. That is what by, for, and of the people means. When did we get used to the fact that only a professional political class could run for office? The truth is, the professional political class, those protectors of the status quo, they have let the citizens of this great nation down. And there is no greater example of this than the Veterans Administration. How long must we live with this stain upon our nation's honor that we cannot serve our veterans the way we should serve them? You know, until Friday of last week, I served as the chairman of a Christian-based organization called Opportunity International. We're the largest microfinance organization in the world. We have lent almost $8 billion, $150 at a time. And I can deliver to a desperately poor woman in the slums of New Delhi, India, alone over a cell phone. But if you are a veteran, you are going to spend months filling out paperwork, many more months while some bureaucrat checks your paperwork, many more months while another bureaucrat decides if you can get an appointment or not. And the regional headquarters of the Veterans Administration in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, has had to have the foundations of the building reinforced because of the weight of the paperwork on the bureaucrat's desk. We cannot settle for this anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We need leadership here at home to unlock the potential of this great nation and to restore possibilities to every American, regardless of their circumstances. But we need leadership around the world as well, because the world is a more dangerous and a more tragic place when America is not leading. The truth is, I have met more world leaders on the stage today than anyone else running for the presidency, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton, only I wasn't doing photo ops. I was having private meetings with world leaders talking about serious issues like business or charity or the issues that matter to them. And I have served as the chairman of the External Advisory Board for the Central Intelligence Agency, advised 2 secretaries of defense, a secretary of state, a secretary of Homeland Security. I have sat across a table from Vladimir Putin, just he and I can tell you, having met this man, it is pretty clear to me that a gimmicky red reset button will not thwart his ambition. But there are some things we could do. There are some things we could do that would slow him down and that would cause him to say, I am standing now seeing an America of strength and resolve. We should rebuild the 6th Fleet. We should rebuild the missile defense program. We should conduct military exercises in the Baltic states, and we should arm the Ukrainians. Every single one of the things that I just mentioned is wholly within this country's control. President Obama always presents a false choice to the American people. He says, if you don't agree with me, the only option is to march off to war. That is untrue. You know, I've been asked what I would do in the first 100 days in the Oval Office, and there is much work that we would have to do in that first 100 days, but I will tell you 2 things that I would do on the first day. I would make 2 phone calls. The first is to Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. And I would make that phone call not just because I have known him for a long time. I would make that phone call because I want the world to know that America stands by our allies, and I want him to tell the world that his was the first phone call I made. And the second phone call that I would make would be to the Supreme Leader of Iran. He might not take my phone call, but he would get the message loud and clear. And the message would be this: whatever the circumstances were, the circumstances have changed now. And until and unless you submit to full and unfettered inspections of every single nuclear facility in your country, we will exact and enact the most crushing sanctions we can. We have a lot to do with how easy or how hard it is to move money around the global financial system, and I would ensure that it was very, very hard for Iran. And I would keep that pressure up until he engages in inspections. And by the way, there is much we can do to help our allies fight against this terrible, evil enemy called ISIS. We can arm the Kurds, as they have been asking us to do for years. We can share intelligence with the Egyptians. We can give the Jordanians bombs and materiel so that they can help fight this fight for us. Every single one of those things are within our control, and we have done none of them. Several weeks ago, I was asked by a reporter whether a woman's hormones prevented her from serving in the Oval Office. Now, ladies, this is a test. Can any of you think of a single example in which a man's judgment was clouded by his hormones? Any at all? Even in the Oval Office. Hillary Clinton must not be President of the United States, but not because she is a woman. Hillary Clinton must not be the President of the United States because she is not trustworthy and she does not have a track record of accomplishment. You know, when I was the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, a publicly traded company, if I made a misstatement of material fact about my record or about our results, I could be sued and charged. If I told one person something that we intended to do in the future, and then told another person something different about what I intended to do in the future, I could be sued. I could be charged. Imagine if we had this level, this standard of accountability among the professional political class of Washington, D.C. The American people will have a choice. Are we going to demand trust, transparency, and more than words from our political leaders? Do we want someone in the White House who is not afraid to be held accountable, who is not afraid to challenge the status quo? Have we had enough of a ruling political class that doles out favors to the wealthy, the well-connected, and the few? We have everything we need to solve every problem. All of our wounds are self-inflicted. We have the potential of the American people. All we need now is leadership and citizenship. So if you want to help me, please go on to carlyforpresident.com and sign up and sign on. We rightly celebrate our founding fathers because they were men of vision and courage. But two of the most powerful symbols of this great and blessed nation are women, Lady Liberty and Lady Justice. Lady Liberty stands tall and strong. She is clear-eyed. She is resolute. She faces outward into the world as America must always face. And she holds her torch up high because she knows she is a beacon of hope in a very troubled world. And Lady Justice, she holds a sword in one hand because she is a fighter. She is a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale in the other hand. And with that scale, she reminds us that all of us are equal in the eyes of God, and therefore all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And with that blindfold, she reminds us that this must be always a nation where it truly doesn't matter who you are or what you look like or what your circumstances are. Here in this country, every American's life should be filled with possibilities, with liberty and justice for all. And so let us rise together to restore the promise of this great nation. Let us rise together to meet our challenges. Let us ensure that this is the greatest century for this, the greatest nation the world has ever known. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all.
We were Jesus, save me, blue jean baby, born in the USA. Trailer park truck stop, faded little map dots, New York to LA. We were teenage dreaming, front seat leaning, baby, come give me a kiss. Put me on the cover of the Rolling Stone, uptown, down home, American kid.
Great job. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed.